Welcome to the Games Growth Podcast. Today we interviewed two guests, Felix Norden, CEO of Mure, and Francis Brankin, head of economy of Shrapnel, as well as one of the co-founders at Mure. Really, really interesting conversation here. We talked about quite a few things, specifically around how to legally, compliantly, and technologically build and scale Web3 economies. I think we could have gone another hour, Warren. What do you think?
Yeah, I mean, the thing that comes to mind is I'm thinking about what sort of clickbaity title we can post this with. You'll see that when it goes live. So people actually listen to it because I think it's super interesting and compelling. But when people hear like navigating legal and compliance issues on the blockchain, I think people's eyes might roll. But this is a super important episode. And I thought it was a very interesting format too, because we have two sides of the same coin. We have Felix from Mure, who is building a platform to help teams be compliant with launching Web3 games to navigate various legal and compliance issues, which sounds boring, but can really make or break your business. And then we have Shrapnel as one of the games that is very mindful of this, that's trying to go very large scale and using this technology and thinking about these same issues from the developer standpoint. So what did you learn today, Xander? What were your key takeaways?
I would say if you're really interested in the game design portion of it, half to two-thirds of the way in, we talk really, really explicitly about game design and token design within the context of Shrapnel. I think that component is really, really interesting. It was part of what I thought was most interesting. They talked about basically what rails do you put around an economy? How do you think about separating a creator economy from a player economy? What are the components of this that you can orchestrate in order to make sure that it's healthy, sustainable, compliant over the long term? And these guys, they gotta be two of the smartest guests we've had on our podcast. I mean, these guys are so sharp, both hardcore AI engineers. Even if it sounds like the topic isn't super exciting, I swear it is. Check it out.
Yeah, big brain individuals this week. So I hope you all enjoyed the episode. Let us know what you think and if you like more of this deep dive content. Awesome. Welcome to the show, everybody. We have what I think is going to be a super interesting episode today. We have two guests joining. And in a pod first, we have two guests in the same room sharing the same mic, which is perfect because for today's episode, we want to dig into what we're calling navigating the economic and legal labyrinth of Web3 and gaming. And so we have my dear friend Felix, who is joining, representing Mure. I've been trying to pronounce it right all day, who are developing a platform to help developers solve these issues. And then we have Francis joining, who is the head of economy at Shrapnel, a team that is doing their best. And I think one of the most forward-thinking teams as far as like building a long-term sustainable gaming business in Web3 that requires both that you do the game right, but also that you are navigating these things that collapse so many Web3 businesses that are treated often as afterthoughts in the realm of building an optimal and functional economy and compliant. And same with all of the legal pitfalls that we're kind of discovering as we go along in Web3. So that's my very long intro. Yeah, Felix and Francis, welcome to the show.
Thank you very much for having us. It's a pleasure to be here.
Awesome. So let's just jump right in. We'd like to start with just some backgrounds. Can you just tell us a bit about yourself, your background, and your path to get to founding Mure and you're working in Web3 full-time?
Yeah, sure thing. So I've always loved solving difficult problems. It stems back from the early school days and university time. So for those who don't know, my background is as a software engineer. I have a full-on degree up to a master's level. My master's degree is in machine learning and AI. And coming straight out of uni and also mid-uni, I started working as first a full-stack engineer at Twitch. And then when I graduated, I moved on to applied science. So basically a lot of machine learning and AI working at Twitch with mostly NLP problems, so natural language processing. And it was a very fun and interesting realm when it came to solving difficult problems. We've always heard about how the AI and machine learning hype came around a couple of years back. I like to say that I was cool before AI was cool, given that I worked with those problems even before people thought they existed, and moved on from then when it actually became hot. So when it comes to me getting into Web3, I started briefly in uni doing some stupid investments into Ethereum during the, what is it now, 2 bull markets back, or what you should call it. Well, that was right when Ethereum was dipping down hard, so I never touched it again until 2020, 2021, when things got more interesting. And that was also around the time when I graduated and got more deep into the so-called shitcoining and degening, and made a lot of good friends, connections, including people like Warren, and I met you, Xander, through Warren as well. And around the time we first met was actually the time when I also decided to kind of move on from the Web2 side and actually delve deep into Web3. So I progressed into becoming a full-time software engineering lead at a small startup focusing on Web3 consultancy and Web3 product development, and then started doing a lot of stuff on the side as well. One thing that I'm known for is the decentralized investment organization or decentralized VC called Spectre, which came to be basically the zero or alpha version of what has now become Mure, which is basically focusing on making it as easy as possible to bootstrap people in any type of financial services when it comes to using the good side of Web3 and making it as accessible as possible. We basically want to make it possible for anybody to fundraise or do transactions or anything using the blockchain within a couple of minutes.
Yeah, and I think that's a great framework for identifying great businesses that need to be built is first solving a problem for yourself and then realizing other people have those same problems and productizing that. That's definitely a spirit we try to embody here at Upptic. Every piece of software we've built has been first and foremost to solve one of our own problems. And then we try to refine, polish, and open that up to other people. So much respect. And then Francis, tell us a little bit about your journey and how your paths eventually crossed with Felix.
So I'll give you an initial background on myself. I started off as an aerospace engineer doing a lot of stuff with mixing AI and drones together. So things on autonomous flight and optimizing, how you can go from A to B, as well as like just larger systems, implementations on things like propulsions for satellites. So then I kind of pivoted into this space because I realized that it does not pay very well in the UK. I think the starting salary is like 25 to 35K. The starting salary in crypto is much higher, if you're good at trading, that is. So just always kind of been on the periphery of the space. So since about 2012, looking into the market, doing research on things like Bitcoin, and then kind of taking the leap once I finished my education to actually try and do something in this space full time. So similar time frame to Felix to actually, get your toes wet and put some money in the game. Also not the greatest time. And then I kind of spent a lot of time lurking on crypto Twitter. So from the kind of aerospace side, I had a pretty good deep understanding of a lot of the technical side of this place. And then also a lot of the problem space, like solving difficult problems is what I find interesting. And then slowly found my way to Shrapnel by just meeting the right people. It's a very, very lucky story. I actually met Calvin, who's the head of biz dev over there, via Discord, and he just decided to hire me without knowing anything about me because he was like, oh, he seems to know something. And then shortly after, I actually met Felix when we were trying to plan an AMA for Shrapnel and Neo Tokyo. We ended up getting distracted talking about AI and his dissertation on natural language processing. And then I think 3 days later, I was reminded by Shrapnel, hey, weren't you meant to organize something with Neo Tokyo? I'm like, oh, shit, yeah. So that's kind of the initial story of how we met.
Cool. Well, I want to start with the aperture opened all the way. And so I want to talk about what's the current state of Web3 and crypto and games particularly.
On the Web3 side, we're in an interesting place, right? Like we've just had the ETFs approved. It's very clear that some kind of regulation is coming. I'm not sure how closely you're following the Coinbase lawsuit right now, but the judge, I think yesterday, actually said, hey, maybe it's time to reform the how we test and how we decide what is a security and what isn't. So like we're at this kind of very pinnacle moment. There's probably the biggest time in history for it where we've had giant financial institutions come in. We've had regulators turn around and say, hey, maybe we're looking at the space wrong. Oh, well, not regulators, but the judges that decide, what becomes the regulation coming in and saying that. So it's very clear that there's some kind of uptick in adoption where the institutions are saying that this could be a legitimate thing, like we all think it is. That's why we're here. So I think we're at a very nice spot from the eyes being on us. I think the one problem we have is, especially very recent history, we've had a lot of people do very wrong things that were very illegal. So we're kind of living with that. But it's very clear that there's money to be made, which is probably the only thing that matters for these banks that are coming in. So I think we're in a very, very healthy spot with a lot of eyes and ears from the regulators listening to us. And then specifically in gaming, I think it's basically the same thing. Like we've had a lot of products, for example, like Shrapnel, that received tens of millions of dollars worth of investment, and games of AA and AAA quality take 2 to sometimes 8 years, depending on how you're actually going about development to actually make. And a lot of these games received investment 2 to 4 years ago. So I think we're about to be in a spot where this year is going to be very, very interesting with all of the money that was poured into it. You're going to see some really, really fantastic products coming out. And with a little more regulatory clarity, because people have already launched products, comes, I think, much better and clearer visions for these crypto games that are going to come out.
Thanks, Francis. And Felix, anything to add there? What's the temperature check from your perspective? I know you and I have been closely following Web3 gaming space for a few years now. What do you think about this current moment?
Yeah, just as much as I like being optimistic as Francis came off as sounding there as well, I feel like it's going to also come to a hard stop for a lot of projects that are coming out there as well, as we'll actually now figure out and find out who is building quality versus who isn't. And we all know that during the last bull into the bear market, there was a lot of criticism towards crypto gaming and so on, just because people in the gaming realm didn't want to touch anything that had to do with crypto because that was scammy, it was scummy, it was dirty. And it made it so even a lot of the bigger profiles didn't want to touch it with a 10-foot pole. And I think it's going to be good in the sense that we're going to get some form of cleaning of the space in that sense. So good products like Shrapnel and other primary genre games are going to come out and actually show what the quality should be and making it sound like it's a top tier AAA game or a high quality product with crypto aspects, rather than the whole focus that had been before about just making quick and dirty money from playing a somewhat poor game. With a lot of interest growing into layer 2s and other dedicated chains like Solana and AVAX or Avalanche, I think things are going to open up a lot more. And I know Francis will be able to talk more about that as well with what Shrapnel has been working on. But it's going to be interesting to see what is going to come out of gaming tech and so on in the future, I feel like, to make it more sustainable and easy for people to get into that space as well. As for Web3 in general, it's nice to see this upswing. I feel like it's going to be, like Francis said, interesting to see what happens with the economies lawsuit. And I'm not sure if I'm happy or sad to hear that the Howard test is going to be changed, because I'm worried that it's going to become way, way stricter and way, way harder to define what a security is. Or it's going to be loosened up and make it more easy to distinguish what an actual security token is versus what isn't. But hey, only time will tell.
Yeah. Before going a little deeper into the specifics of how both Shrapnel as a gaming team and Mure as a platform are addressing some of these pitfalls we're going to talk about today, let's identify the issues a little bit more. So